Water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, I didn't know anything about The Last Airbender. Then, everything changed when my best friend said, let's do a podcast. We could call it Avatar State Radio. 6,953 days had passed before I discovered Avatar. Not the Blue Cats, but a 19-year-old cartoon. Like Aang, I have a lot to learn, but I believe I'll love Avatar The Last Airbender. Welcome back to Avatar State Radio, the show where we recap a show from so long ago. But good news is, it's the first time I, Kevin Gallagher, one of your hosts here, have ever even seen the show. I'm 12 episodes deep. I'm loving it. And I'm joined by...
My name is Mike. I've seen most of the show, pretty much every episode.
I thought there was more.
I'm just playing around. No big deal.
And this week we're talking about episode 12. Last week we talked about how it was the worst rated episode of the series, but you know what? It wasn't that bad. I don't know how this rates on the IMDb. Mike, I'm sure, will let us know, but we are talking episode 12.
9.0. Oh, you got effects. Bro brought effects that nobody's going to see but us.
I know, because I'm not even recording the video.
Yeah, this is a 9.0 episode. Like, going up against The Great Divide, this episode is up there.
So people did not stop watching.
Right. And they liked, maybe it was, you cut out all the people who didn't like the show after Great Divide, and you were left with just the super fans afterwards.
I'm interested by that 9.0, and we'll explore why at the end. But I will say that this one, like looking at my show notes, there's definitely more notes that I have than I did in the other one.
Did you get the most important note?
Oh, I know what you're talking about, but no, I didn't write that down.
No. Did you know about it while you were watching it?
Assuming we're talking about the same thing, no. Only because I think you mentioned it before and I completely forgot until I heard it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good.
People are like, just say it already.
Say Mark Hamill. Say his name.
Yeah, no, I because you had mentioned that he was the Fire Lord before, but I completely forgot. To the point where, like, when he first started talking, I was like, what? No, Mike's wrong. And then I just listened more and I was like, okay, there it is. I heard it now.
Like, you can detect a little bit of the Joker in, like, when he's talking.
There was the first like couple lines or words. It was unique enough, and then I heard the Mark Hamill, like, more Joker than Luke Skywalker.
No, I have got to say, across every medium that they've done so far, I am always consistently in like with the Fire Lord, because they've got Mark Hamill in this version, they've got Cliff Curtis in the M. Night Shyamalan movie, and then they've got Daniel Day Kim as the Fire Lord in the Netflix version.
Which is Daniel Day Kim. You know, I look at him and I don't get like bad guy vibes from him.
No, but he does a really good job with it. Like he's got a gravitas that like doesn't feel right for someone who was on Lost.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like that's not what I expect as the Fire Lord. Not that it should be a old white man that I expect either for Mark Hamill, but
right. And even Cliff Curtis, I don't think was really right for the role, but I really enjoyed Cliff Curtis as the Fire Lord, and I like Cliff Curtis. Fear the Walking Dead.
Fear the Walking Dead is what he's in?
Yeah.
Wait a second.
I see you searching your mind for who he is.
Yeah, I think.
And he was also in Training Day, and he was in the other Avatar. He was in Way of Water.
I think I know who he is. I'll have to look after the episode. I'll have to look him up to see if I can confirm it. But anyway,
well, so one more thing before we dive into the greater bit of the episode. So, I mean, you were like saying like you can't see Daniel Day Kim as like this bad guy, but I remember hating Jin on Lost in like the early seasons because he was such a like a shit head. Just.
That's true. But he was like a real life bad person, right?
That's
like,
true. That's
Like
true.
a real life asshole can be different than a fantasy version of a bad guy.
I think that you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Well, that is happening. I don't even know when we're doing that in relation to this show. A
My
while from
guess
now, I'd
is
imagine.
4 months from now. We're gonna say September 13th of 2024. That's when you're gonna first watch your first live action episode.
Oh, are we watching that before we watch?
Oh yeah. So what I would imagine we would do is we finish the first season of this, then we finish the M Night Shyamalan movie, then we do the Netflix show's first season.
Oh,
We're not
wow.
going to be able to keep that up because they're not going to be able to do a whole second season by the time we're done with.
Right.
But I think that having that juxtaposition of those three things would be a fun way to go into the second season.
Awesome. All right. I'm excited for that. All right. That's completely, you just saw like a behind the scenes production talk that I was surprised about. So this episode, The Storm, opens up with a dream sequence that Aang is having that's really a nightmare, which also leads into a storm. You will be surprised or maybe you won't be surprised that that's a big part of the story this week. And
it's in the title. I never saw it coming.
Well, and I didn't see it coming so soon, I guess. But I like that in this dream that starts off as like a good dream. You see like, Aang's happy flying on Appa. Sokka is flying with the airbending tool,
the kite or whatever we'll call it.
And Momo is just as a giant flying lemur now that Katara is riding, which begs the question: will Momo get to that size, or was that just a true fantasy that he was dreaming up?
Yeah, it's a little bit weird because so much of the show has become prophetic. Like, right. Hey, we've got Sozin's comet coming. Hey, there's a storm, and then there's a storm. Like, are we destined to get super huge Momo? Which is the name of my band, by the way.
You know what? Because it makes no sense. Like, unless you're an Atla fan, like Momo, it does sound like a band name. I like it.
Super huge Momo, not just Momo. Super huge Momo is my band name.
That's true. That's true. But then it turns into this nightmare. There's a storm. You see his friend Gyatso, and asking why he left. And it's obviously weighing pretty heavy on Aang that he left Gyatso, which is something that we didn't really know about until now. And I mean both the fact that he seemingly left, that could be interpreted at the beginning of this episode that like he just got frozen for 100 years. What we thought was a joyride.
Right. Yeah. We thought it was like, hey, this was just a random happenstance that he got caught in the,
right.
In whatever storm from back in his time and got knocked into the water. But for the first time, we're seeing there might be more to the story than what we first saw.
Right. And we also don't know until now that like this has been weighing on Aang. Like this kind of comes out of nowhere. Like we've seen him we've seen him deal with, the pain of realizing that Gyatso is gone and that his temple was attacked. But we, other than that moment, and seeing it weigh on him in that moment, we haven't really seen him be sad about, being the last airbender or about, not being with his friend Gyatso. So, this kind of comes out of left field, but in an organic way, because again, we don't know how much time has passed between the last episode and this episode.
Right. And you know what, at the same time, like it might be sort of out of left field from like an audience perspective at first, but you are able to create some connective tissue because you have the storm in the past, the storm in the dream, and the storm that is barreling down on this area that Team Avatar and Zuko are heading towards.
Right. And just a side wild note that I have here is when they wake up from this nightmare, because Aang wakes everybody up. Well, why is it that our boy doesn't have a sleeping bag but the other two do?
You know what? I'm sure it has something to do with like religious customs and stuff like that. Because like we know, like he talks about in this episode how he's vegan, he doesn't eat meat. So like maybe it's like a similar situation. Like I don't use like the resources of like animals or something like that. I don't know. I'm making
Interesting.
stuff up as I go.
Interesting.
But
Yeah.
another side note. So we had mentioned that this is another episode that we see Zuko in. Did you notice while you were watching The Great Divide that there was no Zuko, or was it another one that kind of snuck by?
I mean, yes, right? Like you do, but like I don't, and I guess I didn't think about it last week because I was just like, and again, we said last week that we didn't hate this episode, but I was just like watching the train wreck, and it was. Listen, it would have served us better to have him in that episode, I think, more than it
Right.
would
If
have.
you had some kind of distraction that could have strengthened the episode. But I will say, I was not aware of it until like realizing, oh, wait, there was a B story in this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I did not, and oddly enough, I think I noticed his absence less than in other episodes where where he's not around. But that's that's not to say that the quality of the episode was better.
Right. But it is nice because we do get some Zuko in this episode, and I would say that I think of all the Zuko, centric parts of the episodes that have, that this follows, this has been like the grand slam tour for Zuko.
Oh yeah. This episode, I think, did a lot of great things. And focused these episodes that focus like on the past, I always really enjoy. And I love that this episode, once it got to like the flashbacks, it was really just a parallel of Aang and Zuko, and kind of their past and why they feel the way they feel.
Yeah, it puts a lot into like the psyche of the characters. It helps to set a lot into motion and everything. It is so funny seeing like Aang, and his things from his perspective, because he doesn't look like he's changed at all. But you see Zuko, who looked like this little fresh faced kid. And then you're left with like this grumbly version of who he is now. Like it's hard to imagine him in that other way.
Right. My first note for my Zuko flashback notes is that he sounds happy.
Right.
Which is, this is Dante Basco, right? That voices him.
Yes, that's correct.
Credit to him for having that range of like, oh, it sounds like the same person, but there is definitely a way you've been voicing this character that is grittier and obviously more villainous. And now you're going to a flashback scene where, I don't know how much younger Zuko is here. I would say just by looking at him, he's definitely at least like 2 to 3 years younger, if not more. And
yeah, I mean, you figure his quest to find the Avatar has had to have gone on for a very long time at this point.
Right. And so not only does he look younger, but like, it's very hard, especially when you're an adult, I think, to sound younger, which I feel like he's doing already. Like he's already trying to sound not like an adult Dante Basco. So now he's taking it even further back than the Zuko we've been with the entire, season thus far. And not only sounding younger, but sounding happier. There's less gritty there. For the most part, like this version of Zuko we're seeing is like a good guy. Like he doesn't want to see people get hurt.
Right. And you know what, though? At the same time, we do see present day Zuko make choices like that as well.
Absolutely. Not only, yes, in this episode, but we've seen him make those choices in previous episodes as well.
Right. And even for the, like, against the betterment of his quest in this episode.
Right.
And again, like you said, in previous episodes, we've seen him do that as well, because he could have turned away from his uncle to track Team Avatar. And in this case, it was, hey, like if we go even further into the storm, we're going to risk the lives of everyone on board. Like, just let him go. Like, we'll get another opportunity later.
Which one would argue that was the conclusion he should have come to earlier when his uncle gave him that advice.
Right.
But obviously he feels like he's had so many close encounters, and the Avatar, the Aang, the gang, they keep on slipping through his fingers. So while it's clearly the wrong choice, which is proven right as the storm approaches and they're in the storm, I think that he's clearly been affected by more, like, we now know why he's so affected by the fact that he's been banished by the Fire Nation, because it was his own father that banished him. The one great Mark Hamill banished him from the Fire Nation until he could find the Avatar. So that's why this quest is so important to him, because yes, I think there's obviously the clear cut face value of restoring his honor and being welcomed back to the Fire Nation, but I think it's also to like gain favor with his father again.
Yeah, I would think that's probably the more important thing to him is, how do I get back in Dad's good graces? And to me, I don't know for sure if this was just my interpretation or anything like that. It felt to me like Iroh was basically saying, like, there's no way back. Like, it was clearly, this was chosen because it's an impossible task. Like, the Avatar hasn't been seen for 100 years. He probably doesn't exist anymore. Like, I gave this to you because I never want to see your face again.
Right. And clearly now, and even the Fire Lord, at this point knows that there's a chance, like, oh, the Avatar is back. Like, everyone knows that the Avatar is back.
Right.
Or most people should know at this point. And most definitely the Fire Lord knows. So, now there's a chance. But Zuko continues to prove, throughout this series and in this episode in particular, where it matters most, that like he is not his father. Like, despite his father being like, okay, we are going to make choices that involve the loss of life of our own people. Zuko doesn't seem to want to cross that line. He crossed it. He was willing to cross it, but then when push came to shove, like, no, I'm going to do what I can to save my people.
Right. Exactly. And I think that shows probably more so than we've ever seen before that there is some good in Zuko.
Right. And I think that there's still overall, a question mark on whether, he's good at the end of the story or not.
Right. Is he redemptive?
Right. Like, I still feel like I feel like him and his uncle just happen to be the bad guys that you kind of like, that you ultimately want to see fail. But I think they're going to end up being the bad guys that I don't know if there's redemption. I don't know.
Well, I will say this. The one thing that they did for themselves with most of the show so far, but certainly with this episode, is they showed somebody who is a worse bad guy.
Right.
And Zhao was a worse guy, I would say as well. But certainly Fire Lord Ozai, like, if you're willing to do that to your kid,
right.
you're trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. And they, while showing that, they also showed that, as we said, Zuko is just not that person.
Right.
Which, even if he were to capture the Avatar and go back to the Fire Nation, ultimately, if he's not that person, he's still a failure in his father's eyes. But along with those flashbacks, we saw flashbacks from Aang, which, before we touch on that, I do want to touch on another note that I had, which was when the gang arrived to the market and they are trying to get food because they don't have any more food. Turns out they have no more money either, which is really hard to get food when you have no more money. So there's this bickering couple about fishing because she senses the storm coming.
Because of her creaky old legs.
Right. And then you have her husband who, I have to say, this is my note that I have here. Quote, "Quit your nagging, woman," unquote. Holy shit is my note.
You're not okay with quit your nagging?
I am just so that line is such a line that I just don't think works in 2024.
Oh, I still absolutely think it does. Like, you could tell that at comedy shows and stuff like that.
I think you're right. It just stood out to me like, quit your nagging, woman. That line, I was like, oh my God. The fact that like that is a dude that gets punched in the face in 2024. like his wife or whoever he's talking to is punching him right in the face.
Oh, I would say that to Rihanna if she was on my case. I mean, I never have that problem, but and maybe it's just the relationship we have because we say way worse to each other in a loving way, but
it's just a line that stood out to me as a 2005 show. It stood out 100%.
Hey, one thing before we digress much further on the fisherman and his wife and what's happened afterwards. When Team Aang realize that they don't have the money, the salesperson puts a boot right in Sokka's ass. Do you realize? Like, did you? Now, I'm just saying, it's not my fault that like I didn't realize we didn't have any money, and it's not like I stole any food or anything. But you bet my sore ass I'm going to take some of your food after you kick it.
Yeah, and like they are children at the end of the day. Like she's an adult,
right?
I mean, what's worse than the husband berating his wife is the adult attacking children.
Right.
I think that's worse.
I got butt hurt on Sokka's behalf.
So like Sokka ends up working for quote unquote double, maybe not, based off the guy's reaction, to help haul in some fish. While that's happening, the fisherman actually, the reason Aang runs away is that the fisherman like attacks Aang.
Right, calls him out for his failings as the Avatar.
Yes. And which, is already based off what we've seen in this episode so far, it just is piling on top of whatever Aang is feeling right now.
Yeah, it's clearly weighing heavily on him and everything. Right. Like he definitely has some regrets for what happened in the past. But I guess when he ends up fleeing to the cave and Katara goes after him, we kind of get we'll talk about the flashbacks first, I guess.
Yeah. So the flashbacks, which is Aang now, telling his stories. They do parallel, I think, Zuko's flashbacks pretty well, where like they're both happy children for the most part. Obviously, doing different things. And at the end of the day, they both feel like they are not welcomed in their home anymore.
Right. And I find them both pretty sad. Like yes. The children absolutely. Being like, we can't play with you anymore. Like you're the Avatar.
Right. Which I find wild. My first note for that flashback is he had the tattoos before he knew he was the Avatar. And I know that we discussed in a previous episode that the airbenders get their tattoos when they have mastered airbending. So obviously he mastered airbending before they told him he was
right,
the
which
Avatar.
Should have been like a clue. Like, hey, wait a minute, something's a little off with how quick I'm learning this. Like none of the other kids.
Right. But yeah, and then like when he finds out he's the Avatar, like he was warned of it is crazy. What I really took away from this flashback is how quickly he found out he was the Avatar to when he got frozen in the storm. Or I guess when he froze himself and Appa in the storm.
Yeah, because it was not a long amount of time. It was, hey, I'm dejected and now this happened. And it very much is a cool duality that we see between the two characters, because one of them is obviously being iced over and one of them is being just burned over.
Right, yeah. And ultimately, and whether Gyatso is right or wrong, like he was looking at what's best for Aang. While the argument being made by the other airbender elders is that we got to look at what's best for the world, and Aang needs to train, and your relationship with him has tainted that. And Aang witnesses this conversation. So on top of being told by the other kids who he's not better at airbending all of a sudden, like he's still as good as he was the day before they all found out he was the Avatar, but the
Right.
kids don't want to play with him. So
Right.
now he's playing games with Gyatso. And then Gyatso's getting shit for that from the other elder, and Aang, I think, feels that a little bit. And then ultimately, he overhears this conversation about him being sent to the Eastern Air Temple to be trained in a way where there's no one overly familiar with him that will feel protective.
Right.
And that leads to Aang running away, which, again, one could argue that a couple days have gone by from when he found out that he was the Avatar, because this all didn't happen in an afternoon, but it is still a relatively short period of time for this kid to find out that he's the most important being in the world, to know that there is likely a war coming, and that now he's going to be sent somewhere where he knows nobody. And like, of course this kid's gonna run away.
Yeah, it shouldn't strike anybody as that's a surprise. Like you're giving this little kid who Gyatso's right to say, like, he still needs to grow up. Like, it's a lot to put on a young person. And you would assume, like, to some extent, probably the Avatars past have had to make tough decisions and learn on the fly and things like that as well. But in this case, a war seems to literally be on their doorstep. They very likely know about, like, the upcoming, the empire that the Fire Nation wants to create and things like that. So it shouldn't strike anyone as too much of a surprise that it was too much for this kid. And then to see things like the fisherman seeing this 12-year-old boy in front of him and not really putting two and two together is kind of a surprise. But at the same time, we also see at the end of the flashback sequence, Katara kind of putting voice to reason about, like, the things that we feel as watchers. There's a good chance that if you were there that night, even Avatar powers aside, you probably would have been overrun as well. Right. So we need you now, here, and there's a reason that things happen the way they did.
Yeah, and this is like the ultimate parallel that I really liked about these flashbacks, because she says a line to Aang that says, "You give people hope," and then Iroh says a line at the end when he's talking to the other crew, saying that the Avatar gives Zuko hope. And what a lovely parallel that those lines really run. And obviously, like, the hope that Zuko has it's nefarious, right? Like, it's not good for Aang.
Right. I have the hope of doing something dastardly to the Avatar in order to have redemption.
Right. But still, like, just the sentiment behind both is very lovely, to be perfectly honest. And, right. It really makes you feel for both these characters who ultimately had tragic childhoods, even though and Aang especially, are still in their childhood.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of funny to see, like, how things are going with both of these characters, because we spend a lot of time with Aang, and he's kind of committed, I think, a lot more to going down the right path and everything like that. And in Zuko's case, really his story is very redemptive, whether or not you're talking about a good redemption or a bad redemption, because he could go either way. It could be, hey, if I do succeed and bring the Avatar to my dad, yes, I'm getting redemption in some fashion, but does that make me a good guy?
Right. I also, it paints Iroh in a new light too, because is it made specifically clear that he's the Fire Lord's brother?
I don't know. I think he said it before that he was the Fire Lord's brother. Or something along those lines. I don't know for sure. I don't know if in what we've seen so far, I don't know if it's official that he's the Fire Lord's brother. I think, like, I can say yes, he is, but I don't think that it's.
I mean, that's the assumption I've had this whole time, is that he's the Fire Lord's brother. So it paints Iroh in this whole new light too, because it's not like Iroh was banished, right? Like, only Zuko was.
Right.
And these people that hopped on a boat with him just either believe in his cause or whatever the reason might be. And Iroh clearly, I think, does not like how his brother treated his nephew. And this episode actually did pave a very good argument for, like, oh, they might be redeemed and may not be complete assholes and may be good at the end of the day.
Right. It's tough to show what they did and still pull the rug out from under you at the end.
Right. And then, this kind of, we talked about this at the near the top of the episode, actually, but then, everybody's in the thick of the storm. We got the fishermen and Sokka. They're like on the boat and it's being destroyed by this, the storm. The Fire Nation, Zuko's boat is being tossed around. There's a guy about to fall off that him and this lieutenant that they butted heads, had an argument about respect earlier. They have to deal with that. Katara and Aang and Appa and Momo, they go to help save everybody. And, there's this really cool scene where Iroh redirects the lightning.
Yeah. How cool is that?
That is very cool use of your fire bending powers.
In like all the like Final Fantasy that I've ever played and everything, like I'm programmed to see lightning as like air magic. Mm-hmm. So to see that happen was kind of like the first time I watched it, like, did that guy just get struck by lightning? Like nothing happened. So it is pretty cool that clearly Iroh is a very powerful firebender.
Yeah.
Like it's not like, it's a big deal. It's something that you don't see like anybody else getting ready to do or anything like that. He's like, I can handle this.
Yeah. I based off that alone, I would argue that he's maybe only second to his brother. And maybe not. Like maybe Iroh is very, very interesting in this episode on several different levels. And has made it so that I'm like, okay, like, I liked Iroh before, but like now I'm like curious.
Now you're ready to get hurt if something goes wrong.
Right. But like, and as you said, like Zuko ultimately chose to put the safety of his crew first and not go after the Avatar, who we do see go into Avatar state to kind of ultimately get out of this predicament they're in, because even though they're on Appa, the boat and the tidal wave just overtake them.
Right. And this is the first time that we've seen Avatar state in a while.
Yeah. And there's a brief moment that it very much looks like the same scene when he goes into Avatar state 100 years ago, where this glowing ball encases everybody. And 100 years ago, it froze. He froze it so that he would be safe in 100 years. And who knows if that was like the master plan, right? Like it seems like a lot with the Avatar is, about fate and destiny and stuff like that.
Yeah, you're correct.
Well, this time, he doesn't freeze it. Like whether that's Aang having some sort of control, whether it's just, as the Avatar and being in an Avatar state, like now's the time to stay because we have to fight.
Right.
But
how
uses that power to save everyone.
Is controlled by the one who's currently the Avatar versus all the pre-versions that came before you.
Right. Yeah. So, and I don't really have any notes after that. So I don't really, I know like everything, like there's fish that get paid out and whatnot. And, so, they don't get money, they get a fish. Aang, this is where we discover Aang's a vegetarian at the tail end of the episode. He doesn't eat meat. But this, so to kind of cap it off, unless you have anything else to say specifically about the episode.
Just trivia, my friend.
So like this, honestly, now talking about it, I actually love the episode more after I did watching it. Not that after watching it, I said to myself, these were the two weakest episodes we've had so far. Having talked about it now, and like reliving those flashback scenes, it's definitely up there. I don't know where it ranks in the 12 episodes we've watched. I don't think it's the bottom two anymore, like I did immediately after watching it. But it is. I think the fact that we had so much, to story with Zuko and Aang and their past and how related that was, and being able to talk that out with you, like it instantly jumped it up a couple spots. And
other people have ranked this episode of the first 12 episodes the absolute highest.
That's interesting. I don't know if I think that it is the highest rated episode for me. But
out of curiosity, from what you can remember, what would you rate higher?
that is a good question because everything starts to blend together, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, we watch this and we say last week and stuff like that, even though like we see some episodes and talk about some episodes back to back. But some of the episodes we've seen legit like 12 weeks ago.
Yeah, yeah. If I'm being honest, I want to say that two-parter we had recently. I think that was 8,
Avatar
9.
Roku.
Yeah, that was really, really good.
Yeah,
you
the
know
Avatar
what?
Roku episode is only 3 points away from this one as far as how people react to it.
You know what one I really liked, and I think I liked more, and I don't know which episode it was, but it was that episode where they go to the air temple. I think it was like episode 3 or 4.
Yep. It was episode 3, and that is that's up there as well. It's 8.4 versus the 9.0 of this episode and the 8.8 of Avatar Roku.
Yeah, I think that episode, but I really like when a show gets like emotional, and this episode got there. It got there. And I don't want to rank this one more than that because it is so recent in my head and the other one is not. So it's like unfair to judge that one so poorly,
Right.
for lack of a better term. So if there's an episode that beats it, it's probably that Air Temple episode or Avatar Roku.
Yeah.
Roku.
Still all very 3 good episodes.
Yeah. And you know, I'd probably, with that being said, this is probably a top 5, if not a top 3 episode.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's good.
All right. Hit me with your trivia.
All right. So the Air Nomads, the way that they determine, hey, you're the Avatar, is done in a way that's very similar to the way that they in real life choose the next Dalai Lama. What they'll do is they'll have like prospective children play with artifacts that might be based on something that the previous Dalai Lama or a previous Dalai Lama has enjoyed playing with. So that's how they're like, all right, you're the kid who I'm ultimately going to kiss on the mouth. You forgot about that, didn't you?
Yep.
I hope we don't have any super Dalai Lama fans for this show, because that's a little offensive to the Dalai Lama, but maybe you shouldn't be kissing kids on the mouth.
Right. That's super interesting. And that goes to like their whole culture, right? Isn't there like the Air Nomads kind of based off of?
Yeah, they're kind of like Buddhist monks and stuff like that. Yeah. Conversely, we have the Fire Lord's War Room, which in the art of the animated series was stated that it was based and inspired on Chinese and Egyptian architecture.
Okay.
Which you can kind of see. There is a spoiler that I'm going to avoid talking about a little bit in the way that it is a spoiler on the trivia site that I go to. Okay. But what I will say is, and this is for fans who are like me or rewatching or, you know, just enjoying this about the show a little bit, there is a character who we see in a flashback who you don't even realize it, like if you're watching it for the first time, who becomes a huge character going forward.
Interesting.
So it is going to be fun for you if and when you do a rewatch to go, oh shit, they were there the whole time.
Interesting. I mean, it's the fire. One would say the Fire Lord, but
well, I mean,
that's obvious.
Yeah, that's so obvious. That's too on the nose.
Interesting.
I'll give you one more hint. They don't have a speaking role on this episode.
Interesting.
There's also a second character who we've already met who briefly shows up in this episode who I completely missed as well.
Who was that?
Zhao.
Oh, yeah. I do remember seeing him. He was the one that gave the order to kill everybody, right? To sacrifice
I don't recall. I thought that was an older person, but I don't know.
Very cool. Now that's some exciting trivia. Now I got to pay attention.
Right. Yeah. I don't think like you could, in theory, go back and watch this episode and be like, well, that character looks like they're drawn a little different, but like, you're not going to get like, it's so funny that they knew about this character now because you don't see them again for 8 more episodes.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, now I know the countdown.
Right.
All right. So yeah, that is, we went, well, I don't even know if we went long because my timer's all off from our little pause that we took.
Right. I want to say we're probably around like 32 minutes.
Yeah. But this episode again, yeah, it nailed it. It hit it out of the park. And if anyone bailed on episode 11 when this show came out almost 20 years ago, shame on you because you missed
it just goes up from here.
Yeah, you missed a hell of an episode. You can find this show on avatarstateradio.com. It does not have social media because I just do not have time to do any more social media than I'm already doing. But if you want to hear thoughts about the host of this show, you can go to, for me, Kevin Gallagher, thatnerdykev.com.
You can go to tellus.com if you want to find my stuff, or patreon.com/tellus, or etsy.tellus.com. I don't freaking know.
You used to have these nailed. You had them.
I got this head cold right now that I can't let go of.
All right. Well, you know what? We're going to all settle down, relax, get in our feels like Aang and Zuko. Nope. Zuko.
That was wrong too.
I know. I lost it.
We're not leaving this show until you get it right.
I got to pull up my note. Zuko. No. Nope. Zoko. No.
Nope.
Zuko.
There we go.
Zuko. Holy hell. How did I lose it? Zuko. We're going to get in our feels like Aang and the Prince. We're going to get in our feels. We're going to go meditate and just hang out in that avatarstateradio.com land, folks.